Hi, Professor Jenal. So I am going to talk about Beyond the High Blue Air, which is a memoir written by Lee Spinney. I'm going to answer all the questions, but I'd like to start by just actually reading a little piece from an article I found on an interview with Spinney. So the first part is, what makes life worth living in the face of death? What do you do when life is catastrophically interrupted? And what does it mean to have a child fade away as your own life crumbles? And she wrote this little insert about Miles and how he used to be, which I think is important to really know when you're reading a memoir, to really get to know the person, as it is a true story and it really is about somebody. So Miles didn't want to be abstract. He wanted to create. He wanted to create things of great beauty and power, and he wanted to change the world. He saw the future brightly lit and gleaming ahead of him, having reached that point where ambition and self-awareness happily coincide. He now acknowledges his weaknesses, knows his strengths, and with exhilaration he feels anything and everything is possible. So that's a little bit about Miles. And then I also found this picture of Miles. I like to see who I'm reading about. So the first question is about the image of God, or Imagio Dei. So when we talk about the image of God, you are, in my opinion, as a Catholic, created in the image and likeness of God. Genesis 1:27, and God created man in his own image, in the image of God, to resemble him, to commune with their maker, a likeness mentally, morally, socially, and ethically living. That being said, the ambiguous loss and disappearance of someone who is still there, being in a minimally conscious state, how can one possibly commune with their maker? How can one possibly live socially, mentally, and morally? Miles's death sentence, condemned to a prisoner of his own body, forbade him to continue his Imagio Dei. Now for the poor and vulnerable question, as followers of Christ, there is a preference to stand up for marginalized voices, to be heard and defend the defenseless, and assess the lifestyle, social and political institutions impacting the poor. When I think of poor and vulnerable, I don't always think of poor as someone without money. I just feel like someone who is poor with in need for someone else to defend them and take care of them. Spinney wasn't poor as in a low-income poor. She appeared to be well-read, well-rounded. She loved reading. She was throwing dinner parties. I mean, her son was in Aspen. So I felt like they did come from a good upbringing. That being said, though, I feel that she was poor in the sense that she needed guidance and direction from the outside public to defend her for her son and to help defend her son and his rights. When a human such as Miles is incapacitated and deemed incarcerated to his own body, he's vulnerable. But not only is Miles vulnerable, his entire family is vulnerable. Their lives were disrupted, uprooted by this tragedy, turned upside down and became chaotic. The only focus was now Miles and his well-being, his healing, recovery. It's almost as if nothing else mattered. It was an all or nothing, and that's vulnerability. As for the poor in this situation, per definition of poor and vulnerable, stands for Miles's family in need of defending and support, especially with politics and government and law. Doctors and nurses in some part of this memoir proved to be less than acceptable as they display pompous behavior, treating the family as they were inferior. Now, understanding the situation, question 3, in this memoir, it's raw, honest, and displayed every type of emotion. Spinney understands telling her son's story, she must hold nothing back. While paying tribute to her son, she is inadvertently begging for a better way. Spinney is fully aware of the inevitable. Although in the beginning she promotes her hope and perhaps denial, but eventually comes to terms with the fact that her son, there's no turning back. She understands the torture Miles is enduring as a prisoner of his own body and mind, needs closure. He needed closure, and I believe this memoir portrays the inevitable ending of acceptance, release, and closure. We must all be entitled to live and die with dignity. Miles was caught in a painful, nightmarish limbo between life and death. Spinney displays her understanding eventually that prolonging Miles was against his best interest. She showcases ethical questions of assisted death and suicide and quality of life versus quantity. Their story displays the understanding of ultimately withholding or upholding human dignity and appreciating the full joy of being alive. She displays the final and ending of her son's life, the finale, where ultimately it was all too painful that even a longed-for death comes with a debilitating, crushing grief. Did the story make me laugh? There were memories that made me laugh, fond thoughts, better days, family moments that were cherished. Ultimately, anger and tears were my top emotions. Even while reading it, I was crying a lot of the time. It could just be because I have a child around that age, and I'm not sure how I would handle it. I feel like she handled it amazingly well. Her beautifully written memoir displayed a powerful testament of personal grief and was topped with ferocious critique of how society deals with suffering and death. She describes Miles's final years from a maternal perspective, weighing in on the person he was and who he had become. With anger, I was angry because I felt like keeping people imprisoned by medical care against their wishes made me angry. It's as if you're incarcerating a patient, relinquishing him of all and any dignity, which is really what we're talking about here, is having dignity. Banishing him to a dark, cold prison. Miles' unnecessary suffering, endless excruciating pain, humiliation. It was just heart-wrenching, and it angered me how Spinney advocated so aggressively for her son's needs and was really sometimes just pushed aside as being annoying and a pestering family member. I think Spinney assumes, this is the next question about assumptions for readers, I think she assumes that her readers are compelled to face the ultimate choice for quality of life versus quantity of life, and the quality of life of loved ones, and for medical and legal professionals to grapple internally for what it means to save a life and who has the right to end it. I believe Spinney wrote this in hopes that readers would understand how painful it is to imagine Miles in moments of awareness being so profoundly lonely, unable to communicate, and being totally dependent on others for everything to do, every aspect of his life, especially him being an athlete. He was just really basically a ghost of himself. He was already dead. I honestly feel that they should not have brought him back. The language and imagery Spinney portrays depicts the true meaning of unbearable suffering. His death was the one good thing she could give him, but it was forbidden. The imagery of limits of medical science and the searching of unlimited potential of human compassion. Was this useful, worthwhile, and significant? Everything was. This memoir really touched my heart. If you think about food, sterile water, and multiple medications flowing into Miles's body through tubes with barely any progress, he really didn't make any progress in these 4 years. He made little slight changes, and that's about it. Spinney chronicles the painful years of support, hope, faith. Her writing of her loss and her son's death multiple times is so heart-wrenching to me, yet immensely honest and brutal. and overflowing with power and trauma. Writing her memoir, I really think, displayed the process of letting go, the power of healing, and the dignity of dying. Reclaiming Miles's identity and paying tribute to the man he once was. Pain was displayed as a tsunami. She said, that's what Spinney said, and you had to allow this to crash all over you. Oblivion was preferable, learning that in the end, medical skills and technology are now so advanced that a life can be saved, as in avoiding death, but medicine is still not able to give meaningful life. This was really a great, wonderful memoir to read, and I really would recommend it to everyone. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I went a little bit over. I'm a talker.